I am on a voyage to a remote island where I need to survive for a year. No contact, no backup. Just me, a lighthouse, and the wild South Atlantic. The last man who worked there vanished. The only other person on the island, the lighthouse keeper, is cold, strange, and hiding something. There's no going back. In September 1914, I gripped the rail of a ship as it cut through the South Atlantic toward a speck of land that would become my prison, my battleground, and ultimately, my salvation. Captain Axel noticed my silence, approaching with the casual confidence of a man who'd seen too many broken souls pass through his ship. "We're almost there," he said, but his words felt more like a warning than reassurance. When we finally reached the island, no one greeted us. The silence was immediate and unsettling, broken only by the crash of waves against jagged rocks. I had been sent to replace another meteorologist, but there was no sign of him anywhere. The island felt abandoned, forgotten by the world. Captain Axel accompanied me to search for my predecessor. We approached the lighthouse, a stark, lonely structure that seemed to pierce the gray sky like an accusation. When we knocked, only silence answered. I forced the door open, and that's when I met him. Gruner. The lighthouse keeper emerged from the shadows like some wild thing, greeting us with cold indifference. His naked form moved through the space with an animal confidence that immediately set Captain Axel on edge. When the captain asked about the former weather official, Gruner's response was delivered with chilling casualness. The man had died from typhus. I should have known then that nothing about this place would be what it seemed. After Captain Axel left me to my fate, I wandered the island, trying to convince myself that the year ahead would be manageable. I told myself I would simply record wind patterns and weather data, count the days until my replacement arrived. How naive I was. In my cabin, I discovered the diary of my predecessor. Aldor, his name was. As I flipped through its pages, my blood grew cold. There were sketches, a photograph of his wife, and most disturbing of all, drawings of the lighthouse surrounded by strange reptilian creatures. At first, I dismissed them as the fevered imaginings of a man driven mad by isolation. I wish I had been right. The next morning, I found a circular pattern made of shells and stones near the shore. Something about it felt deliberate, ritualistic. Through my telescope, I watched Gruner performing his daily routine with the casual indifference of a man who had abandoned all pretense of civilization. That night, everything changed. I was reading by lamplight when I heard it, rustling outside my door. At first, I thought it might be Gruner, but the sounds grew louder, more aggressive, scratching, growling. Then I saw it, a reptilian hand sliding under the door, fingers ending in claws that scraped against the wooden floor. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stepped on the creature's hand. The thing outside became agitated, and suddenly there were more of them. Many more. I dove under the floorboards, hiding in the cramped space beneath my cabin as they tore at the walls above me. Through a small gap, I caught sight of one of them, scaled skin glistening in the moonlight, eyes that held an intelligence both alien and familiar. When it peered through the same gap, I reacted on instinct, driving my knife toward its eye. The creature recoiled with a shriek that still haunts my dreams. I spent that entire night locked beneath my own floor, listening to them destroy my temporary sanctuary, wondering if I would see another sunrise. The next day, I ran to Gruner, begging for shelter in the lighthouse. He refused me with the same cold indifference he'd shown the captain, but I was determined to survive. I spent the day reinforcing my cabin and was relieved to find a rifle among my supplies. When night fell again, they came. A swarm of creatures emerging from the darkness like something out of mankind's oldest nightmares. I fought them with everything I had, but there were simply too many. In desperation, I started a fire that drove them back, but nearly consumed my shelter in the process. Fortunately, Rain saved what was left of my cabin, but I knew I couldn't survive another night alone. The next day, I followed Gruner down to the rocks, planning to confront him about letting me stay at the lighthouse. That's when I saw her for the first time, a blue-skinned female creature that moved with surprising grace. I raised my gun, but Gruner stopped me, showing me she was vulnerable, almost docile. I seized the opportunity, offering Gruner my supplies in exchange for shelter. He called me friend to the creature, and she seemed to accept this designation. It was my first glimpse into the complex relationship between Gruner and these beings, a relationship I was only beginning to understand. As we gathered supplies from my damaged cabin, the truth finally emerged. Aldor, my predecessor, hadn't died from typhus. The creatures had killed him. This revelation hit me like a physical blow, but there was no time to process it fully. Sunset was approaching, and Gruner warned me that we needed to reach the safety of the lighthouse. We loaded our supplies into the beacon, and during our journey, Gruner collapsed from exhaustion. I realized then that this man had been fighting this battle alone for far longer than anyone should have to endure. I woke up 2 days later to find the female creature, the one Gruner called Toad, licking my burns with her rough tongue. It was a gesture so unexpectedly tender that it shattered my preconceptions about these beings. Gruner found us like that, and I could see the complicated emotions playing across his face. Gruner took inventory of our ammunition and explained more about the creatures. The female, he told me, was like a loyal dog, devoted to her master no matter how cruelly she was treated. I found myself fascinated by her, sensing something different about her intelligence, her capacity for emotion. But Gruner warned me not to trust her completely. He believed her calm exterior hid dangerous intentions, though I was beginning to suspect his judgment was colored by years of isolation and conflict. He showed me the lighthouse, taking me to the very top where the beacon cast its light across the dark waters. When I asked why he had chosen to stay when he could have left, his answer revealed the depth of his transformation. He would never return to the civilized world now that he was master of his own destiny. I told him I would leave on the next ship, and he wished me luck with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. That night, Gruner prepared me for my first real battle. He instructed me in the use of the flare gun, explaining that its light would signal the beginning of our long night. As the female creature wailed into the sky, a haunting sound that seemed to echo from the depths of the ocean itself. A crowd of sea creatures came barreling toward us. Gruner began shooting with practiced efficiency, but I felt overwhelmed. The reality of what we were facing hit me all at once, and I slowly backed away until consciousness abandoned me entirely. I woke to find Gruner seething with rage at my cowardice. He had fought the entire swarm alone while I lay unconscious. The shame burned worse than any physical wound. The tension between us grew unbearable, especially after I accidentally witnessed Gruner with the female creature in an act that blurred the lines between desperation and depravity. The awkward silence that followed was broken only when Gruner slammed his fist on the table, telling me I had one last chance to prove myself. That night, he locked me outside on the balcony, leaving me to face the monsters alone. I could hear gunshots and my own screams for help, but Gruner had fallen asleep, abandoning me to my fate. When the sun rose, he was shocked to find me alive, covered in blood but breathing. Something had changed in me during that night. I had crossed a line from which there was no return. Months passed, and we fell into a routine born of necessity. The creatures attacked several nights in a row, forcing us to maintain constant vigilance. Days blended together in an endless cycle of preparation and recovery. My daily task was fetching water while Gruner maintained our weapons. I began to theorize about the creatures' behavior. Why did they keep returning? What did they want with the female? Why didn't they attack every night? Gruner showed no interest in these questions. He simply wanted to exterminate them all. One day I returned to my old cabin to retrieve belongings and was startled by my reflection in a cracked mirror. I had changed, both physically and mentally. I trimmed my beard, hoping to reclaim some piece of my former self, but the man looking back at me was a stranger. On the way back to the lighthouse, I found a massive whale skeleton and took a piece of bone, carving it into the shape of a small boat. I didn't fully understand why at the time, but it felt important. During a rare peaceful night, I approached the female creature for the first time. Her skin was cold to the touch, but there was something undeniably alive about her, something that spoke to a part of me I thought I had lost. I gave her a name, Aeneris. While Gruner used her as a servant and slave, I began to see her as something more, a being capable of thought and feeling, trapped in circumstances beyond her control, much like myself. One evening, Gruner invited me to play chess. As we played, I shared my observations about the sea creatures, but he cut me off, demanding I focus on the game. Suddenly, he raised his gun, and I thought he meant to shoot me. Instead, he was aiming at a creature that had crept up behind me. The attack had begun without warning. We fought our way to the top of the lighthouse, where the lantern provided some protection. Gruner was badly bitten during our retreat, and we spent the night trapped in the beacon room, while the creatures tried to break through the glass. In that moment, thinking we might die, Gruner sang a tragic love song. It was the first time I had seen any real humanity in the man, and it broke something inside me. The next morning, Aeneris tended to Gruner's wound with her tongue, and I realized we couldn't survive another assault like that. We were running out of supplies, ammunition, and hope. Then I saw it, a ship on the horizon. My heart leapt with the possibility of rescue, but when I ran for the flare gun, Gruner tackled me to the ground. He was afraid, I realized. Afraid of being left alone with his demons. Aeneris tried to protect me, which only enraged Gruner further. In that moment, I understood that he wasn't just afraid of solitude. He was afraid of facing himself without an enemy to fight. Later, I found a way to communicate with Aeneris using the bone boat I had carved. She understood and led me to an abandoned rowboat on the shore. When I told Gruner about it, he revealed he already knew about it. A Portuguese man had used it to escape a shipwreck, but the creatures had killed him. More importantly, the ship's cargo contained dynamite. Most of it was waterlogged, but there might be some dry enough to use. Gruner initially dismissed my plan to dive to the wreck as suicide, but after witnessing a tender moment between Aeneris and me, jealousy changed his mind. The next day, we rowed out to the shipwreck. Underwater in the old diving suit, I found the container with the explosives, but I also encountered a childlike sea creature that stared at me through my helmet with curious, innocent eyes. More creatures surrounded me, and panic set in. I barely made it back to the surface alive, but we had recovered one crate of usable explosives. Winter was approaching, and we devised a plan to lure as many creatures as possible into the lighthouse before detonating the dynamite. The goal wasn't to kill them all, we couldn't, but to scare them away permanently. But for 3 weeks, no one attacked. Gruner grew impatient, waiting in the cold for an assault that never came. I began to suspect the creatures were smarter than we had given them credit for. One night, frustrated and desperate, Gruner dragged Aeneris outside and forced her to wail, hoping to attract her kind. The plan worked too well. When they came in force. I left the door open as bait, while Gruner prepared to detonate the explosives from above. The creatures poured in, and in the chaos, I had to sprint to the top of the lighthouse to reconnect the detonator. The explosion was devastating, killing many of the creatures. But Gruner, unsatisfied, set off a second charge closer to the lighthouse, knocking us both unconscious. When I woke the next day, I found Gruner badly injured, but alive. We surveyed the carnage together, and I watched him finish off the wounded creatures with cold efficiency. But when I saw one of the dead creatures wearing a necklace, something clicked into place. These beings were more civilized than Gruner portrayed them. Later, while cleaning up the destruction, I found a wedding photograph with "Love" written 3 times on the back. The woman in the picture was the same one from Aldor's diary. The truth hit me like a physical blow. Gruner was Aldor. He was the meteorologist I had been sent to replace. Everything made sense now. His knowledge of the island, his refusal to leave, his transformation into something barely human. The man who had greeted us that first day was what remained of someone who had loved and been loved. Someone who had chosen isolation over connection and had paid the ultimate price. The next day, a child sea creature approached me on the beach, followed by Anaris and others. They wanted a truce. I could see it in their eyes. But Gruner would have none of it. He wanted Anaris back, and when she refused, he fired a flare directly at the child. The creature fell, mortally wounded, and Anaris looked at me with such disappointment that I felt my heart shatter. I had become complicit in something monstrous. I tackled Gruner, and we fought violently until I managed to stab his leg. He gained the upper hand and nearly killed me with an axe, but I called him by his real name, Aldor. The word stopped him cold. "You're not a murderer," I told him, and for a moment, the man he had once been flickered behind his eyes. He dropped the axe and whispered, "Love," as if remembering what that word meant. Then he stepped outside, looked up at the starry sky, and I understood what he was doing. I locked myself inside as the sea creatures surrounded him. They killed him quickly, and I like to think it was an act of mercy. Months later, when the next ship arrived with my replacement, the captain mistakenly called me Gruner. I didn't correct him. The name felt right somehow, as if I had inherited not just Aldor's role, but his entire existence. I chose to stay, to become the new lighthouse keeper, the new guardian of this strange place where the boundaries between human and monster, civilization and wildness, love and hate, had blurred beyond recognition. Standing on the balcony now, watching Anaris swim freely in the waters below, I understand that I found what I was looking for all along. Not the peace I thought I wanted, but the peace that comes from accepting what you are and what you've become. Sometimes hell is just another word for home, and sometimes the monsters we fight are reflections of the monsters we carry within ourselves. I've learned to live with both truths, here on this island where the lighthouse beam cuts through the darkness, warning ships to stay away from the rocks. But some of us, I've learned, were always meant to crash. If you found this story immersive, consider subscribing to the channel. And I'd love to hear what you think. Does telling a movie like this, from the main character's perspective, feel more emotional or engaging to you? Leave a comment below.